All right. Hello, Algebra 1. Today we are talking about solving quadratic equations again, but this time we're learning a new method. Instead of just solving by working backwards, we're going to solve by the method that's called completing the square. Basically, it's what you have to do to something that looks like this, where you have a quadratic written in standard form, number times x squared plus number times x plus number, or minus, like the minus, equals some other number. Right now, as is, we don't have a method for solving by working backwards if we have an x squared and an x in the same equation that are like added or subtracted together. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this. Today, we're going to ignore the case that has a number that's not 1 in front of x squared. So it'll just be like 1x squared plus or minus something x plus or minus something equals number. And we're going to rewrite it as x minus h squared plus k equals number. In other words, and if we have the a there, we'd have an a here. We'll do that next week with the number that's not 1 in the front. But in other words, we're going to take something that's in standard form, and we're going to rewrite it in vertex form, so that this way, once we have it in vertex form, we can solve by working backwards. We can undo what this is, we can square root, get that plus minus, and then add or subtract whatever that number is. Yeah, x equals this or x equals that. So what we got to do is we got to say, well, how do I go from this to that? And that's what this lesson is about. And that, going from standard form to vertex form, that's the method of completing the square. And that's what we're going to be talking about. When I say solve by completing the square, what I mean is take standard form, rewrite it in vertex form by the method of completing the square, and then solve by working backwards. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to get started actually with a little bit of review from some stuff from chapter 7. You'll notice problems 1 through 6 on your assignment are actually should be fairly simple review problems from chapter 7. And the reason I'm doing this is because these are these are skills that you need in order for completing the square to make sense and kind of be easier. So I'm going to do problems 1 and 4, walk you through those, and then I want you to do problems 2, 3, 5, and 6. So problem 1 is just to multiply x minus 6 squared. So x minus 6 squared. So remember, if we're multiplying something like x minus 6 squared, what we do, well, one of the things we could do is we could draw the box, right? Or the rectangle diagram. Well, it's going to be a square this time. We got x minus 6 there, x minus 6 there, and we multiply. X times x is x squared, x times negative 6 is negative 6x, x times negative 6, negative 6x, negative times negative is a positive 36. Write it all out, x squared minus 6x plus 36. We notice that these are the exact same, negative 6x and negative 6x. We are subtracting and then subtracting, so it's going to get more negative. So we have x squared minus 12x plus 36. That's what we get when we multiply this. And it's equal, so this is equal to x minus 6 squared. X minus 6 squared is equal to that. They're equivalent. They're the same thing. So you're going to do the exact same steps for problems 2 and 3. Multiply this by itself. That's what it means to be squared. Write out your answer as x squared plus or minus something x plus or minus something. All right. Let's look at problem 2, which is factor x squared minus 18x plus 81. Well, if we're going to factor this, once again, we can use the area model, the box. So I draw my box. I put the x squared in the top left. I put the 81 in the bottom right. And I say, okay, I need now two numbers to go here and here that are going to add to negative 18. So blank plus blank equals negative 18. And then blank times blank these two numbers are also going to multiply to the product of those. So 81 times 1 is just going to be 81. So I need two numbers that add to negative 18, multiply to 81. Take a moment, think about it. You can pause it, try to get it. Hit pause, think about it. What'd you get? Well, we know 81 is, see, like 3 times 27, that's not it. 9 times 9 is 81. If I add 9 and 9, that gives me positive 18. Now, I need a negative 18, so what we can do is we can make them both negative. So I can say negative 9 times negative 9 is 81. Negative 9 plus negative 9 is negative 18. If we add them, it's more negative. So here I have a negative 9x and a negative 9x. They go inside that area model, or that box. So now in order to factor this, what we do is, well, we just write out what we have on each side of the box, like what we would have gotten here. Because we're just doing the backward steps here. We have x times x to get x squared. X times negative 9 gives me negative 9x. X times negative 9 gives me negative 9x. Do a little double check. Negative 9 times negative 9. Yeah, that's 81. Sweet, we got it. So the factored form of this is x minus 9 times x minus 9. And guess what? There's a really easy way to write that. It's x minus 9 squared. Cool. So if you haven't done so yet, try problems 2 and 3. And then try problems 4 and 5. Or sorry, that's 4. That's problem 4, not problem 2. My bad. Sorry, that's problem 4. That's not problem 2. That's problem 4. So if you wrote that down on problem 2, sorry. So try problems 2, 3, 5, and 6. If you need to, you can always just like rewind back to this and rewatch that part of the lesson that I just did. So pause it, do those, and I'll move on to problem 7. So problem 7. Let's just put that right here. So let's go right here. Problem 7, we've got x squared minus 14x plus blank equals parentheses x blank squared. So what we're doing here is we're filling in the blanks, looking at the pattern that hopefully you saw in problems 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And you're going to continue this for problems 8, 9, and 10 to kind of like get more practice with this pattern. And what this is going to do, this is going to set us up for that completing the square that we're going to need to know. So if you look at this answer from the x minus 6 squared, right? X minus 6 squared. You'll notice that this 6 and the 12 and the 36, right? You'll notice that. So I only have this number, the negative 12x, because that's all I have here. What could I do to find that number and that number? Or, in this case, if I only have the negative 18, what can I do to negative 18 to find the 81 and the minus 9? Well, you'll notice that both of these are subtraction. This is subtraction, so it's subtraction right here. If this was addition, if it was plus 14x, we'd have a plus go there, right? That's always going to match. Now, hopefully you're like, oh, well, 12 divided by 2 is 6. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So to match this number, this b value from standard form, to this number in the perfect square, half of this is going to be that. And that's as long as we have the correct number here. So we got to go, well, what's half? Let's take this negative 14, and we're going to divide it by 2, and that gives us negative 7. So that's why we get a minus, this is going to be a minus 7 right here. X minus 7 squared. Now to find this number, how could I take this, divide by 2, negative 6. What can I do with a negative 6 to make it a 36? Or what can I divide by 2, we get a negative 9. What can I do with a negative 9 to make an 81? Well, we know we got a negative, and I multiply it by a negative, I get a positive, right? So if I go negative 6 times negative 6, you get 36. If you go negative 9 times negative 9, you get 81. So what we're going to do is we're going to square whatever we get from half of that. When we divide this number by 2 and square it, we get that number. So if I square this, I'm going to get a 49. So square it, and that gave me that 81. So basically for these type of problems, half of this number squared is going to give you that number. So take this number, divide it by 2, and square it. That will give you a perfect square trinomial, and it's always going to be equal to x. If this is minus, this is minus. If this is plus, this will be plus. And then half of this, whatever you squared here, is going to be this number there. Okay? So go ahead and try to fill in the blanks for problems 8, 9, and 10. Then I'm going to do problems 11 and 12, and 13 and 14 will be for you. So go ahead and hit pause, try 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to erase this. Dry it off. Okie dokie. So, problem 11, we have x squared minus 10x plus 6 equals negative 15. Our job here is to solve this. So, you'll notice there's an x squared and x. We cannot solve by working backwards. And on the assignment that you turned in last week, you would have looked at this and said, hey, solve using a different method. We can't solve by working backwards. What we're going to do is we're going to solve by completing the square. In order to complete the square, we're going to take this, we're going to rewrite it as something squared plus or minus something equals number. So the first step for solving by completing the square, and let's just say solve by completing the square. The reason it's called completing the square is we're trying to make a perfect square out of it. And we're going to have to add and subtract. We're going to have to do little algebra tricks to get there. That's the completing part. So we're going to take this. This is the method. So go ahead and write this down with me. Like copy this down as I go over it. We're going to say x squared minus 10x. I'm going to say plus blank, parentheses, minus blank, plus 6 equals negative 15. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add in a number, and then I'm going to subtract that same number. And that's what these blanks are representing. I just took this equation, and I just plop this. Sorry about that wonderful noise. I just plop this plus blank minus blank in here. And that way, with doing that, we're going to get something really nice here with really nice numbers. In other words, a perfect square, like you did on problems 7, 8, 9, and 10. And then we'll have like the leftovers that we can deal with from that. So we look at this and say, hey, how can I make this, what number can I put here to make that a perfect square? Think back to what you did on those previous problems, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Well, we take this negative 10, we divide it by 2, that gives us negative 5. We square it, and remember, if you're squaring a negative, it's a negative times a negative, makes it a positive. So that gives me plus 25 on the inside here. And it's always going to be a plus right there. Always. Every time. Doesn't matter if that's a minus or a positive. Doesn't matter. Minus or plus. It's always going to be plus this number here. Okay. Because when you square something, something times itself. Positive times positive is positive. Negative times negative is negative. So I'm adding 25. Now what I've done is I've made this equation 25 bigger on the left side. So what I need to do is make it 25 smaller on the left side as well. So I'm adding 25 and I'm subtracting 25. And guess what? 25 minus 25 is 0, right? So we're not actually changing the equation at all. We're just making it look like it has the numbers that we want. We're manipulating the equation algebraically so that it's something that we can work with. So now, if you look at x squared minus 10x plus 25, if you factor that, I'm going to do this kind of quickly. You get x squared and 25. We need two numbers that multiply to 25, right? And add to negative 10. What are those? Negative 5 and negative 5. So here it's x minus 5 times x minus 5. which is the same as x minus 5 squared. And remember, on those problems 7, 8, 9, and 10, when you had this, you were filling in the blank of x plus or minus whatever squared, because this is the same as x minus 5 squared. If you took this and multiplied it, like right here, you would get that. So we're just rewriting it as a perfect square so that we can solve by working backwards. All right, and now we look at this and we say, hey, look at that. There's a minus 25 plus 6. Well, that's minus 19, because negative 25 plus 6 is going to be negative 19. And then we still have equals negative 15 there. So check it out. We have a perfect square. In other words, here, that's vertex form. And that's a perfect square. We have completed the square. That's the whole completing the square part. So now we have vertex form, something squared plus or minus something equals a number. We can solve by working backwards. So that's what we're going to do. We say, hey, cool, it's something we can solve, like we did last week. We're going to go, well, x minus 5 squared minus 19. Get rid of the minus 19 by going add 19 to both sides. That gives me x minus 5 squared equals 4. Because negative 15 and a positive 19 are going to give me 4. Now, I got this x minus 5 squared. I need to undo the squared part. So I square root both sides. And remember, plus or minus square root. So here I have x minus 5 equals positive or negative 2. Don't forget to actually square root that number. Some of you were saying like square root of 4, and then you're writing down the number 4 instead of square rooting it. Okay, and this is square root of 4 is 2, because 2 times 2 is 4, right? All right, so now we just got to get x. We don't want x minus 5 equals, we want x equals. So I'm going to add 5 to each side, add 5, add 5. So here I get x equals 5 plus 2, which is x equals 7, or x equals 5 minus 2, which is x equals a positive 3. So those are my two answers. Also, make sure another common mistake from last week is when you had x minus 5, make sure you actually write out the step of adding 5 to both sides. Some of you were just like pushing the number over and using a negative where you should have been using a positive. All right, so that's example problem 11. I'm going to do problem 12 as well. If you want to, I recommend try problem 12 right now. Like pause the video, give it a shot, try it, and then work through wherever you get stuck. If you get stuck from the video that I'm going to do, just in a moment, if you get it done, then just check your answer on problem 12 with the video. So, I don't need to do anything over there. I don't know what I'm doing there. I'm going to erase this. We're still solving by completing the square, so I'll leave that there. And I'm just going to rewrite, or I'm going to write problem 12 up here. So let me dry this off so I can write on it. There we go. So problem 12. Here, the negative 25, the number is on the left-hand side, that's fine. And then we have x squared plus 16x plus 30. Okay, so once again, we're trying to solve by completing the square. We notice this is in standard form. It's got an x squared and an x. We don't have a method of solving that as is. We got to rewrite it in standard form. The method we're going to use to get there is completing the square. So we're going to leave this negative 25 where it is. So negative 25 equals, and then I'm going to put in the plus blank minus blank. So x squared plus 16x, I'm going to say plus blank, parenthesis, minus blank, plus 30. Okay, that's a good first step every time you're doing one of these problems. And what we're going to do is we're going to find the number that I put for this blank that makes that x plus something squared. And then whatever number I add inside the parentheses, I'm also going to subtract outside the parentheses. So the net, the overall thing that happens is just like plus 0. It's like plus number minus number, it's just 0. Okay, so we're not changing the equation, we're just manipulating it to look the way we want it to look. All right, so we look at the 16 and thinking back to what we did in previous problems, like, oh, in order to make this a perfect square, I gotta take this 16, divide it by 2, that gives me 8, and then square it. 8 times 8 is 64. So I add 64 inside the parentheses, and I subtract 64 outside the parentheses. All right, so now what I can do is I've got this wonderful perfect square right here. It's a perfect square trinomial. We can factor that, or we can remember the trick from problems 7 through 10, what we saw in problem 11, that this, when I factor it, is going to be just x plus, adding because there was a plus 16x here. If that was a minus, this would be a minus. X plus, and it's always going to be that number. Half of this 16 is 8, so x plus 8 squared. And now I have a negative 64 plus 30 is going to be minus 34. And here I have a negative 25 still. So now I have vertex form, x plus 8 squared, that's that perfect square that we completed, minus 34 equals negative 25. So what we got to do now is solve by working backwards. So to solve by working backwards, say, hey, it's x plus 8 squared minus 34. Add 34 to both sides. 34 minus 25 is going to give me 9. X plus 8 squared. I got to get rid of the squared now, because x plus 8, and then squared. Squared's the last thing. So I square root both sides. Oh, sorry about, oh, come on. It's so squeaky. Sorry, it's so squeaky. Come on, chalk pen. So plus or minus. And we remember, because we're square rooting, we have to go with plus or minus square root of 9. So here, the square root undoes the square on the x plus 8, so we just have x plus 8 left over. And here we have positive or negative 3, because the square root of 9 is 3. Last bit, it's x plus 8. I got to undo the plus 8. I'm going to go minus 8, minus 8. So here I have x equals negative 8 plus 3. Or x equals negative 8 minus 3. That's that plus or minus 3, which gives me x equals negative 5, because negative 8, 3 more positive gets you closer to 0, so negative 5. Or x equals negative 11. And those are my two answers. And that's it. All right, so just a quick recap of what we did here. We identified number equals standard form with an x squared and an x. We go through x squared plus 16x, we go plus blank, parenthesis, minus blank, and then the plus 30. That step is just put in that plus blank, minus blank. In order to fill in those blanks, we take half of this number, take this number and divide it by 2. In this case, it gave us 8, and we square that answer. So 8 squared is 64, so that's that plus 64 minus 64. Right, that's that trick, that magic number we need in order to complete the square. So now we take this x squared plus 16x plus 64, using that 64, that number that we wanted, and we factor it, or we remember our pattern, that really it's x plus half of this number, 8 squared. So we rewrite it as x plus 8 squared. Because if I go x plus 8 times x plus 8, it's x squared, 8x, 8x, 64, and that 8x plus 8x is your 16x, right? So it's the same thing, is rewriting. And then the negative 64 and 30, that makes it negative 34, right? Then we just solve by working backwards. Add that over, square root with a plus or minus, subtract the 8, get our two answers. All right, hopefully that's enough for you to get through the lesson. You got problems 13 and 14 left to do. They're just like problems 11 and 12. Use these notes to help you out. And if you have questions, come in during the office hours on the video chat or email me questions, that sort of thing. Try to get your questions in before Friday if you want them on video chat, because I'm not going to really be video chatting on the weekend. But I'll try to get some emails answered over the weekend if you have them. All right. Thank you. Good luck on the assignment.